The unified quantum field. The concept of the unified field suggests that beneath the apparent separateness of particles and forces, there is a deeper field that connects everything at the most fundamental level. Quantum mechanics suggests that particles and forces are expressions of this unified field, where reality exists as a web of interconnected matter, energy, and potential. Essentially, particles and matter can be seen as localized expressions of the same underlying field. Everything, particles, light, forces, emerges from this field. The field is the sole governing agency of the particle, quote by Albert Einstein. The quantum field governs, organizes, and unifies all the laws of nature and is always directing energy into order by patterning light into form. It seems that the quantum field has these characteristics. It's the source of everything we experience. It expresses itself as the manifested, as particle and matter, as well as unmanifested reality, in the form of wave, energy, and potential. It connects everything together. It's unaffected by space and time. It acts as a conduit and allows instantaneous transmission of information. It responds and interacts with the consciousness of the observer. Now, we said the unified field is basically organizing light into denser and denser forms, and how the light is organized into matter seems to have patterns, and simple, self-similar, and repeating patterns are called fractals. One of the main descriptions or main adjectives for fractals is self-similarity, which means that each piece, no matter how tiny, resembles the larger pattern that it's part of. So fractals look similar at different scales, regardless of how closely or how far you examine it. And a fractal view of the universe implies that everything from a single atom to the entire cosmos is made of just a few natural repeating patterns. Here are some examples of patterns and fractals you can find in nature, and you can see how like each tiny piece, when you look at it, it doesn't matter the scale, but if it's close or from afar, it repeats itself and it builds a structure out of the tiny pieces. I'm gonna venture a guess and presume that you have no idea what the middle top row is. And I was astonished when I heard that that image is actually a representation of mountains from really far away. And you can see the snow covering the mountains. And it's crazy when you compare it to the lower right section, because they look so similar when actually the bottom right one is copper crystallization. It's crazy how beautiful it is, and actually there's a reason why humans find fractals so beautiful. Studies have shown that looking at fractal patterns, especially those found in nature, like trees, coastlines, clouds, and so on, can reduce stress by up to 60%. And viewing these patterns, even in images, can mimic the benefits of spending time in nature, such as improved mood and reduced mental fatigue. This is because the visual complexity of fractals resonates with how the human brain processes information. This improves creativity, focus, and attention, and creates a calming effect which activates the relaxation response or the parasympathetic nervous system. Fractals can also be observed in our physiology. Here you have like the synaptic connections, and as you can see, they follow the same basic structures of tiny pieces repeating themselves over and over again. And we have the same idea reflected in our brain and in our lungs, which is crazy when you think about it. Essentially, we can see the interconnectedness in the design of the manifested physical reality, which reflects the interconnectedness of the unified quantum field. And here is something that is a great example of the interconnectedness of the manifested reality. We breathe in what the trees breathe out, and we breathe out what the trees breathe in. So essentially, this is a not so subtle way of that tells us that that we are connected, not just amongst each other, but amongst the entire existence. Take a look at this. Our reality is sometimes described as a holographic field or a hologram. Hologram is an interesting way to understand our existence because a hologram encodes information in every part of the image, which means that even a small tiny piece of it can recreate the whole image, which aligns with the idea of the fractal view of the universe. Consciousness also appears to be holographic in nature. That means that all of us, our individual consciousnesses, are like tiny portions and little pieces of a greater whole. But going back to quantum physics, early in the 20th century, the physicist Max Planck, who is regarded as the father of quantum physics, while receiving his Nobel Prize for his work in quantum theory, made a statement. He said, "As a man who's devoted his whole life to the most clear-headed science, to the study of matter, I can tell you as a result of my research about the atoms this much. There is no matter as such. Matter doesn't exist the way that we think it does. What we see as matter is matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force, and we must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter." I mean, imagine like devoting your whole of your life to the research about matter essentially and coming to the conclusion there is no matter. That's crazy, but Einstein seems to agree because here's a couple of quotes: "That deep emotional conviction of the presence of a superior reasoning power which is revealed in the incomprehensible universe forms my idea of God," which is a beautiful idea. "And the most beautiful and profound emotion we can experience is the sensation of the mystical. It is the power of all true science." Beautiful. And my favorite scientist, Nikola Tesla, my namesake: "What one man calls God, another calls the laws of physics. My brain is only a receiver. In the universe, there is a core from which we obtain knowledge, strength, and inspiration. I have not penetrated into the secrets of this core, but I know that it exists. The gift of mental power comes from God, divine being, and if we concentrate our minds on that truth, we become in tune with this great power." Yeah, Nikola Tesla is a very special character in our history, and if you don't know much about him, I certainly recommend looking into Nikola Tesla and his research and his patents and his discoveries and stuff he did is mind-blowing. Also, to tie it in with the beginning of the presentation and the section by Bruce Lipton, this was his conclusion. Because we are machines made out of protein, by definition, we are made in the image of the environment, and that environment being the universe, or to many, God. To me, God represents all that is, the whole environment comprising the universe. Also a very beautiful way to put it. Everything that we have seen points to the existence of an intelligent creator and a master designer that set everything into motion and that even today participates in his creation. The unified quantum field has many names. Some people call it the field, unified quantum field. Some people are speaking with the universe or the source. Some people are often using terms such as God's mind, divine matrix, higher intelligence, or divine intelligence. And some people are using the terms divinity, love, and God. For the sake of this presentation and as my own personal preference, and for simplicity, because if you're always talking and if you need to use 3 or 4 words to express this 3-letter one, it doesn't make any sense. So for the purposes of this presentation, we will stick with the term God to describe the unified quantum field, everything that results from it, like the manifested reality. And as you will see later on, we will go into some more detail about what God represents. But first of all, a tiny reflection exercise. If quantum particles are not limited by the laws of science, at least as we know them today, and we're made of the same particles, then can we do miraculous things as well? By this, I'm referring to the experiments that are showing like superposition, being in multiple places at one time. And the only difference between the particles in the experiments and us is that we're made of lots of them. If the stuff that we're made of can be in multiple places at once, then theoretically we should be able to do that as well. We already saw the miraculous effect that people in elevated states can have on each other and even the entire world. Is there more? Most often people talk about famous yogis that perform various siddhis. In Indian religions, siddhis are material, paranormal, supernatural, or otherwise magical powers, abilities, and attainments that are the product of yogic advancement through sadhana. Sadhana is an ego-transcending spiritual practice. Meditation is a form of sadhana, prayer is a form of sadhana, and everything that's like supplemental or in service to the transcending of the ego can be, I think, interpreted as a sadhana. And this is most like what people first comes to the mind of people when they think about special yogic superpowers. it is what I think about. And there are concrete examples of siddhis, especially in the book Autobiography of a Yogi. There are many descriptions of holy men in India who are often able to perform what we can refer to as miracles. And fun fact, when Steve Jobs passed away, this book was the only one on his iPad. I read about, I think he loved India and he frequently visited there, and he was in love with this book. Now for some examples, now for some concrete examples from the book. Against this dazzling background appeared the clearly materialized figure of Sri Yukteswar. Bewildered to the point of shock, I rose from my chair and knelt before him. With my customary gesture of respectful greeting at my guru's feet, I touched his shoes. He was able to materialize in full body in front of Yogananda to convey the message that he will be arriving shortly by train. When he sees him later on the train platform wearing the exact same clothing, he explains his reaction. For a moment, a wave of cold fear passed through me at the unprecedented strangeness of my experience. I felt the materialistic 20th century world slipping from me. Was I back in the ancient days when Jesus appeared before Peter on the sea? But when Yogananda returns from a visit to the Himalayas, Sri Yukteswar uses his power to give him the experience that he had been desperately seeking for all his life. He strikes him gently on his chest above the heart to allow him to feel temporary divine union. An oceanic joy broke upon calm, endless shores of my soul. The Spirit of God, I realized, is exhaustless bliss. His body's countless tissues of light. A swelling glory within me began to envelop towns, continents, the earth, solar and stellar systems, tenuous nebulae, and floating universes. Many such examples continue to be revealed as Yogananda advances, but the most incredible has to be after Sri Yukteswar has passed away at the age of 81. Before my open and astonished eyes, the whole room was transformed into a strange world, the sunlight transmuted into supernatural splendor. Waves of rapture engulfed me as I beheld the flesh and blood form of Sri Yukteswar. So again, a form of materialization even after death. There is a cool story about a yogi that Greg Bryden often uses in his books, and I saw this story in something with beliefs, like rewriting subconscious beliefs. I will put every book that I referenced in the sources section that you can find at the end of the course. So the story goes, in the 11th century, the great Tibetan yogi Milarepa began a personal retreat to master his body. Earlier in life, he had already mastered the power to use psychic heat as an example, to warm his body in the harsh Tibetan winters. Now this is somewhat heavy, because at some point he suffered unbearable pain of losing his family and friends at the hands of village rivals. So he employed his mastery for purposes of retribution and revenge. In doing so, he killed many people and struggled to find meaning in what he had done. So on the day that he realized he had misused his abilities, he went into seclusion to find healing. He needed no contact with the outside world, and he became a recluse, surviving on the nourishment of the vegetation near his cave. In one of the caves where he lived, he met with a student, and to demonstrate his mastery over the limits of the physical world, Milarepa had placed his open hand against the cave wall at about shoulder level, and then continued to push his hand farther into the rock in front of him, as if the wall did not exist. When he did so, the stone beneath his palm became soft and malleable, leaving the deep impression of his hand. The translator that was leading the group into this cave explained, "The great teacher believes that he and the rock are not separate. His meditation teaches him that he is part of the rock. The rock cannot contain him. To the great teacher, this cave is not a wall, so he can move freely as if the rock does not exist." And this reminds me of something. If you watched it, you know what I mean.
Do not try and bend the spoon. That's impossible. Instead, only try to realize the truth.
What truth?
There is no spoon.
There is no spoon?
Then you'll see that it is not the spoon that bends, it is only yourself.
The Oracle will see you now.
Yeah, this is crazy. It's a genius scene from an amazing movie. If you didn't see it already, I recommend that you go and watch it. Not right now, maybe wait until the course is finished, but straight after the course, go and watch The Matrix. There is no spoon. At this point, it would be prudent to mention the recorded miracles of Jesus. Jesus Christ performed many miracles during his earthly ministry, including healing and transforming lives. And similar to other events in his life, Jesus' miracles were documented by eyewitnesses and recorded in biblical history. He transformed water into wine, dozens of accounts where he healed the blind, injured, and the sick. He calmed a dangerous storm at sea. You can see the references from the Gospels and the Bible, if you want to check them. He walked on water. He fed 5,000 men, excluding women and children, with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. He fed 4,000 men, excluding women and children, with 7 loaves of bread and a few fish. So probably when it's 4,000 men, including women and children, is probably like 7, 8, 9, 10,000 people that he was able to feed with 7 loaves of bread and a few fish. And in the New Testament, we read 3 cases where Jesus brought the dead back to life by God's permission: the daughter of Jairus, the widow's son at Nain, and Lazarus. Miracles of Jesus, including the resurrection of other people from the dead, are also recorded in the Quran, where he is regarded as the highest of prophets. Jesus Christ also rose from the dead. His resurrection. Accounts of Jesus' miracles in the Bible represent only some of the multitudes of people whom he made whole. The closing verse of John's Gospel explains, Jesus did many other things as well. If every one of them were written down, I suppose that even the whole world would not have room for the books that would be written. Yeah, so only a certain section of the miracles that Jesus performed actually found a way inside the book. The fact remains that indeed it was not through his own will that Jesus or any other prophet performed miracles. Rather, they were performed by God. And this is a fact that's also explicitly stated in the Bible. A man attested to you by God with miracles and wonders and signs, which God performed through him in your midst. Jesus also said this in Gospel of John to his disciples: believe me that I am in the Father and the Father is in me, or else believe because of the works themselves. Truly I say to you, whoever believes in me will do the works that I do, and will do greater ones than these, because I am going to the Father. Whoever believes in me will do the works that I do, and will do greater ones than these. And we have hundreds, thousands, I don't know how many examples of miracles happening in the name of Jesus. I mean, he did announce it. He gave his blessing for it, and we have recorded accounts of saints who raised the dead, miraculous cures and healings, the gifts of prophecy, the gift of bilocation, the one we've been looking for, being in multiple places at once, stigmata, which are the bodily wounds of Jesus, the crown of thorns, mystical knowledge, levitation and ecstatic flights, also recorded like saints that performed levitation, miraculous voices from heaven, gift of understanding, and also speaking foreign and ancient biblical languages, saints whose bodies remain incorrupt after death, complete fasting from food for years, to name just a few. The book Saints Who Raised the Dead documents over 400 true stories of resurrection miracles in the lives of the saints. There are also incalculable accounts of healings happening in the name of Jesus. 400 true stories of resurrection miracles. I didn't read the book, but it sounds like a good one. As an example, there are numerous accounts of miracles happening around Saint Padre Pio. He received the stigmata, which is the bodily wounds corresponding with the wounds of Jesus, in 1918, and they remained with him until his death. Padre Pio also exhibited many gifts, such as reading of hearts. The gift of reading hearts allowed Padre Pio to discern someone's deceit during the sacrament of confession, or if they simply forgot a serious sin. In Padre Pio's case, he told penitents the sins that they needed to confess. So Padre Pio essentially had insight into a reality usually not known or not perceived, and that's why he was able to advise the people on the sins that they forgot to confess. And even the miracle of bilocation of Padre Pio has multiple accounts. This is really interesting. First of all, to explain the term, bilocation is a special gift of God where an individual can be in two places at once. God uses this gift for acts of mercy to be performed by the saint in circumstances where it's physically impossible for the saint to be present under normal circumstances. While the gift of bilocation has been given to countless saints, one of the most frequent and documented accounts occurred relatively recently in the extraordinary life of the beloved Saint Padre Pio of Pietrelcina. Sorry for the pronunciation. Pietrelcina. Maybe it's even correct. Among the most remarkable of the documented cases of bilocation was the Padre's appearance in the air over San Giovanni Rotondo during World War II. While southern Italy remained in Nazi hands, American bombers were given the job of attacking the city of San Giovanni Rotondo. However, when they appeared over the city and prepared to unload their bombs, a brown-robed priest appeared before their aircraft in the air, and all attempts to release the bombs failed. In this way, Padre Pio kept his promise to the citizens that their town would be spared. Later on, when an American airbase was established a few miles away, one of the pilots of this incident visited the Friary and found, to his surprise, the priest he had seen in the air that day over San Giovanni. The Friary is, to my understanding, like similar to the monastery establishment, except it's not far away from civilization, but it's within like the town's limits and integrated within the city. I think, not the expert here. But we have another account that goes like this. Signora Concetta Bellarmini of St. Vito Lanciano declares that she was suddenly stricken with a blood infection followed by pneumonia. Pneumonia. I'm super sure that it's not pneumonia.
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 Oh,
Pneumonia.
pneumonia. Okay, so she has pneumonia and she has a very high fever. She was reduced to such a state that the doctors despaired of ever saving her. Her flesh had become yellow from the infection, which spread throughout the body. And a relative urged her to direct her prayers to Padre Pio. She prayed to him, whom she had never seen, when suddenly, in full daylight, a stigmatized monk appeared to her and smiling blessed her without touching her as he stood in the middle of the room. Then Padre said, Sunday morning you will be cured. Then he vanished from the room, leaving an odor of perfume which the servant girl also smelled. After this visit, her flesh turned normal color, the fever ceased, and in a few days her health was completely restored. She went with her brother to San Giovanni Rotondo to see if Padre Pio was the one who appeared to her. When she arrived at the monastery and saw Padre Pio in the church, she turned to her brother and said, "There he is the one." We have another one. The third example is, this is a great one. This is Padre Carmelo of Cesano, who was the superior of Padre Pio's friary between 1953 and 1957. He has an amusing story of one of the occasions of bilocation, and he was with Padre Pio and some other friars attending a show at a concert hall that adjoined the friary. Padre Pio followed along during the show with great interest and enthusiasm. During the intermission, Padre Carmelo recalls seeing Padre Pio leaned forward and rested his hand and arms on the back of the chair in front of him, silent and motionless. The friars assumed that he was tired and did not disturb him while he rested in this position for about 5 minutes. As the intermission ended, Padre Pio sat back up and spoke with his fellow friars. Padre Carmelo thought nothing of the incident until the next day. He was visiting a sick man in town, and the man thanked Father Carmelo for allowing Padre Pio to visit him the previous evening. Father Carmelo was perplexed. He had been with Padre Pio at the concert hall, and he and Pio had gone straight back to the friary once the show ended. Pio hadn't left to visit anyone that evening. When Father Carmelo explained this to the man, he and his entire family continued to insist that Padre Pio had physically been in the house. When Padre Carmelo asked the precise time of the visit, the answer was the exact time of the show's intermission, during which Padre Pio had appeared to be napping. There are even more accounts, but I just picked out the 3. And interestingly, Padre Pio also expressed his opinion on bilocation. One day, a monk who was speaking about the bilocation of Saint Anthony of Padua, who miraculously appeared in Lisbon, said to Padre Pio, "Perhaps these privileged of the Lord do not even know when their bilocation occurs." Padre Pio, quickly interrupting him as one who is experienced with such events, answered, "Certainly they know. They cannot know if the body or the soul moves, but they're very conscious of what happens and they know where they're going." He was even questioned by a bishop, an inquisitor from the Holy Office, and under oath in 1921 about bilocation. This is what he answered. "It did happen to me to be in the presence of this or that person in this or that place. I do not know if my mind was transported there or what I saw was some sort of representation of the place or person. I do not know if I was there with my body or without it. For example, one night I found myself at the bedside of a sick woman, Maria Massa, in San Giovanni Rotondo. I was in a convent. I think I was praying. I don't know her personally. She had been recommended to me." "But Padre," she answered, "are you then a saint?" "No, I'm only a creature who serves the Lord through his mercies." In the following section, I will speak freely, as a lot of it is my interpretation. That means I won't necessarily have super many studies to back everything up that I'm speaking about. It comes from the stuff that I've read, it comes from the stuff that I've seen, it comes from the stuff that I experienced, and it comes from the stuff that I hypothesized. But I will remain I am transparent with all of this, so I will say which part is like an idea and which part is like thoroughly tested by myself through experience and through like real world applications in what I've seen. Oh, and we're starting off with the greatest subject. We're starting off with the greatest subject there is. You can think of this as the introductory course to the existence of God. Not all of it is, there's 8 billion people in this world, and there's probably 8 billion interpretations of God. So I'm asking for a bit of grace. This is my understanding and interpretation of everything. It doesn't necessarily have to become yours. It's just a perspective that I think can be helpful to develop, like wherever you are currently. It can be used as a supplemental idea where you can use the best parts like for your own benefit. So the way I understand it is God is all that is, the great I am. And God is the manifested reality, the physical reality. God is the unmanifested reality, the energy, the potential, and the unified field, the quantum field. But God is also the transcendent. That means a reality which exists above the manifested and unmanifested reality. And we can see this as a trinity. And the trinity exists in many cultures and religions, including the Christian religion. So we'll stick for that for simplicity's sake. We have the manifested reality, which is the Son, or represented by Jesus Christ. We have the unmanifested reality, which is represented by the Holy Ghost. And we have the transcendent reality, which is represented by the God Father. Father, God. Now, each of the aspects, like manifested reality, unmanifested and transcended, or Jesus Christ, Holy Spirit, and the Father God, is a face of God, but also fully God, and together they're fully God, like the Trinity of God. So it's not like only together they're God, but like just the manifested or just the transcendent or just the unmanifested reality is an expression of God and therefore God. Just the different faces and aspects of God, but also God simultaneously. Now, this is truly above my pay grade. I will just share a theory that I love, and it's a theory about how the universe and existence began. Like, I'm 100% sure it's not, this is not how it happened, but it's a beautiful idea that I love, that I think connects beautifully to the rest of the stuff we've been talking about and that we will talk about. So give it a chance. The universe began when nothing saw itself in the mirror. This was written by Tor Nortranders, and the book is The User Illusion. So we have God as the infinite source of everything, and this source, this form of existence, is actually beyond form, beyond duality, beyond limitations, and it exists way beyond human comprehension. Just the fact that I'm talking about it is minimizing like this form of existence. And it's a state of pure potential that contains all the highest qualities way beyond the human experience. The closest that we can come to describing it are words like love and bliss. And there is nothing outside of God to reflect these qualities, so there is no way to truly understand and experience them. Love, in its truest form, desires to give and to create. In order to experience himself, God creates a form of self-differentiation, like a mirror or a reflection that allows for a relational experience of all that is. We can say God creates not out of need, but out of an overflow of love. We can think of this mirror as the created universe, an infinite array of expressions that allow the divine to experience every possible aspect of existence, from joy to sorrow, love to fear, unity to separation, all that is. In this sense, creation becomes a way for God to explore himself and express himself. It's similar to when we reflect on our human experience. Without someone around us, we can't really tell if we are loving and compassionate. Our qualities show in our interactions with the world around us. We can think we're loving and that the quality is within us, but there is no way to know for sure or to really experience that quality unless we have something in our lives where we can exhibit and experience those qualities. It's all hypothetical until you can think you're compassionate, but until you're in the situation to act compassionately, you don't really know. But it's a nice idea. Now, with this line of thought, the entire creation, the universe, and all beings within it are not separate from God, but are expressions, reflections, or fragments of the divine, each containing God's essence. And just as light through a prism creates many colors, God is expressed through countless individual lives and experiences. Every part of creation, every life, every emotion, and every story is a part of this exploration, serving as a mirror for God to see and experience his own boundless nature. The dream of God, in which God seeks to experience, understand, and reflect upon the endless possibilities within himself. In the New Testament, John describes God as love itself. 1 John 4, God is love, and whoever abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. This portrays love as both the source of creation and the means through which we can relate to God. Creation is an act of divine love, a way for God to share existence and invite creation into relationship with him. The universe, in this sense, can be seen as an expression of God's desire for a loving relationship. In creating beings with free will, God enables each person to freely reflect, know, and love him. Our relationship with God can be understood as God's way of experiencing his own love in a relational way. God is experiencing himself through the relationships he establishes with us. And if we're looking for an example of that, we have the most literal example ever, which is the life of Jesus Christ. Through him, God experiences human life directly. John 1, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Jesus, as God incarnate, manifestation of God's consciousness, lived as a human, experiencing joy, suffering, love, and sorrow, thus embodying God's union with humanity. The notion of God as love can be found in other religions as well. In Islam, love is part of the essence of Allah, as expressed in the beautiful name Al-Wadud, which is often translated as the most loving or the affectionate. And from the Quran, my mercy encompasses all things. Please, I'm not an expert in Islam or Quran. This is just something I found after I did some research. And the same goes for Hinduism and yoga and Buddhism. I'm not as familiar with them. So if I communicate anything that's not aligned with these religions, please correct me. In Hinduism and yoga, just the notion of God is love is deeply, or the notion of God's love is deeply embedded in the scriptures, practices, and philosophies. God is love manifests in various forms, particularly through Bhakti Yoga, which is one of the primary paths to liberation. Bhakti Yoga emphasizes love and devotion to God as the means to transcendence. It portrays God as a personal being who loves and is loved by devotees. Bhakti Yoga is essentially a devotional path to liberation. Even in Buddhism, that to my understanding that does not emphasize the concept of a creator God, love, compassion, and interconnectedness are central to Buddhist teachings. Metta is a core Buddhist practice that involves cultivating unconditional love, compassion, and goodwill toward all beings. The Buddha encouraged the practice of metta as a means to spiritual awakening and inner peace. Just as a mother would protect her only child with her life, even so, let one cultivate a boundless love toward all beings. We also had many spiritual teachers, mystics, and people throughout history that experienced God as love in a very personal way, feelings of connection, compassion, and unconditional love. And these elevated feelings lead to a sense of connection of not only to God, but also to other people and all of creation as well. We can say that love is the binding force of creation. We're all connected through love, or in other words, we're all connected through God. This experience is readily available to everyone and is already a part of your life. It manifests through our love and compassion for ourselves, our loved ones, our friends, our family, our communities, and the world at large. No man can reveal to you anything but that which already lies half asleep in the dawning of your knowledge. In the book The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. You can imagine God is a compassionate programmer, and he creates the program of reality written in the code of love. That's basically if we had to translate everything that we spoke about in this chapter until this point, and we wanted to translate it to modern informational IT terms. But it's a simple way to think about it. So the key takeaways: God is the manifested, unmanifested, and transcendent reality. God is love, and therefore reality is love. And through love and through God, we're all connected. Simple enough. To avoid any confusion moving forward, every time I use any of these terms, you can switch it with any of the alternatives in your mind. So I'm going to be using God very frequently, but also in some instances, I will use love, I will use unified field, maybe even source. And anytime I use any of the terms, you can just switch it around for the term that you're most comfortable with. So when I say God, you can hear the universe, or you can hear quantum field. Or when I say love, you can hear God. So yeah, it's a fun exercise. So if we just explored God. And the question that we have is, who are we then? So God created mankind in his own image. And this literally suggests a form of reflection or mirroring. The idea is that each person as an image bearer can reflect and display God's qualities such as love, creativity, and compassion. Gospel of Thomas was discovered near Nag Hammadi in Egypt in 1945 among a group of other books which came to be known as the Nag Hammadi Library. It had many, I think, Gnostic texts, which include the Gospel of Thomas. And most scholars place the composition of the documents during the 2nd century, with signs of origins perhaps dating back to 60 AD. Now, Gospel of Thomas specifically is composed just of 114 sayings attributed to Jesus, no context, no stories around it, and almost 2/3 of these sayings resemble those found in the canonical Gospels. The introduction of the Gospel states, "These are the hidden words that the living Jesus spoke, and Didymus, Judas, Thomas wrote them down." Most scholars do not consider the Apostle Thomas the author of this document, so the real author remains unknown. Essentially, it could be the Apostle Thomas, but it probably isn't. They have no idea. And this is a saying, the 3rd saying of the 114, seeking within. Jesus said, "If your leaders tell you, 'Look, the kingdom is in heaven,' then the birds of heaven will precede you. If they tell you it's in the sea, then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is within you and outside of you. When you know yourselves, then you'll be known, and you'll realize that you're the children of the living Father. But if you don't know yourselves, then you live in poverty, and you are the poverty." We can also find this in the Bible in Luke 17. "And when the Pharisees had demanded of him when the kingdom of God should come, he answered them and said, 'The kingdom of God cometh not with outward show. Neither shall they say, Lo, it is here, or Lo, it is there. For behold, the kingdom of God is within you.'" Saying 50 from the Gospel of Thomas, our origin and identity. This is just my opinion, but I believe this is the context of this is when Jesus sent his students and disciples into like other places and cities. So he says, "If they say to you, 'Where did you come from?' say to them, we came from the light, the place where light came into being on its own accord and established itself and became manifest through their image. If they say to you, 'Is it you?' say, 'We are its children, and we are the chosen of the living Father.'" Crazy how beautiful this is. This is something that is also, this idea is also expressed by Paul in 1 Corinthians 3. "Do you not know that you're God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in you?" Essentially, what we can extract from all of this is that we are children of God. We are his sons and his daughters, and his essence, God's essence, is within us as well as outside of us. We are the mirror of God fractured in billions of pieces. Imagine if every life, every human being is a piece of God and a mirror of God, but reflecting God a little bit differently than everybody else. So each one of us is a tiny piece of the mirror reflecting God in our own personal way, through our own personality, experience, and everything that God gave us. Now, think about all the cells in your body and how they play a role in your existence. And we can use the base of this idea and imagine that humans are like tiny cells that make up the body of God. Each one of us a droplet in the great sea of consciousness. As humans, we have the potential to recognize our own divine origin, our true nature, and the interconnectedness of all life. This potential for self-reflection allows us to act as conscious mirror for God, capable of realizing our true identity as expressions of the divine. To put it simply, God is love, and we are from God, so we are love. Human life can be seen as a journey of awakening to our divine nature. The goal is to dissolve the illusion of separation and to realize one's unity with God, thereby fully reflecting God's love and light. We have the opportunity to recognize divine essence within ourselves and within everything around us. Through awakening, we can establish a deeper connection with the Source, allowing the divine to experience and manifest itself consciously through the individual's unique perspective and personality. This calls for us to see ourselves as both reflections and participants in God's self-exploration. We basically become conscious reflections of God's love, allowing God to shine through us. A quote by Eckhart Tolle, "You are the universe becoming conscious of itself," which is beautifully put. And we have a quote by Rumi, a Sufi mystic and poet. "We are the mirror and the face in the mirror. We are the sweet cold water and the jar that pours it." And Rumi has beautiful, beautiful poems, the ones that I was able to see. So just as a mirror reflects clearly when it's clean and unobstructed, we also reflect God more fully when we live in alignment with qualities like love and compassion. In this way, we are participating in His expression within creation. This is often described as becoming one with God's will. Our lives, choices, and behavior become one of the ways through which God's love, wisdom, compassion, and creativity are made manifest in the world. By living in alignment with love, we participate in helping the world grow closer to its intended harmony with God. In Eastern Orthodox Christianity, there's a concept called theosis, which means becoming partakers of the divine nature. Matthew 5. "Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect." Statement by Jesus. Theosis teaches that the goal of human life is to grow in likeness to God, allowing God's image within us to become fully realized. This also represents the culmination of God's purpose for creation, to bring all things into harmony with Himself, thereby completing and repairing the fractured mirror in which God is fully known and reflected in love and unity. In this new heaven and new earth, the reflection of God becomes perfectly aligned with the Source, representing the culmination of God's desire to experience and be united with His creation. As God made us in His image, we can also view our existence as a trinity. We simultaneously exist on three levels: manifested as our body, unmanifested as our spirit, and transcendent as our soul. Soul is beyond the body and the spirit, and it's always connected to God, so it can be seen as the part of God within us. We can also think of it as superconsciousness. We already mentioned the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. You already know what it is. In your normal day-to-day life, your mind is busy with thoughts about work, family, and everything else. This is the conscious mind, and the subconscious mind is the part of you that stores everything that you ever experienced and everything about you. It also runs in the background. The third level is the superconsciousness, and superconsciousness is like stepping outside of all that noise that happens on the conscious and subconscious levels, and this is the part of you where you're aligned with the deeper truths and divine qualities. It's the part of you that feels connected to God, other people, and the world around you. Superconsciousness is the way your soul expresses itself. It's the part of you that helps you make decisions based on love and truth, and that guides you toward becoming the best version of yourself. You can feel the state of superconsciousness when you're in nature, praying, meditating, or experiencing something deeply beautiful. It doesn't have to be like just the examples that I mentioned. It's happening nonstop. And this is when you can actually experience the state of superconsciousness, because the state of superconsciousness is often described as a state of love, joy, and connection that doesn't depend on external circumstances. And that's when you know that you're in the state of superconsciousness, when you're in a state of like elevated emotions and an elevated state that doesn't depend on the external stuff. Then you're acting from a place of superconsciousness. This is important to understand. Like, you have your body, but you're not your body. You have your mind, but you're not your mind. You have your thoughts, but you're not your thoughts. And you have your memories, but you're not your memories. Your true self lies beyond all of that, beyond identification itself. But if we really need to identify with anything, then our soul or superconsciousness is probably our best option. Usually we're so connected, or we're so identifying with our thoughts, and we think that we are our thoughts, which is, if you ever experienced intrusive thoughts, that's a scary idea, because if you have like some ideas, or if you have some thoughts that like are less than idyllic, that represent violence, sickness, and stuff like this, and then if you identify with your thoughts, you come to the conclusion that you're sick and that you're a violent person. You identify with that as with being it, when instead you can just choose to ignore the thoughts and to like pay no attention to them, and that's when you detach. Our intended natural state is one of union with God. Union with God is a state of elevated emotions, or to bring it back to the previous chapters, heart coherence, through which we reflect God's qualities. We can also say it is a state of harmoniousness, a state of harmony with the nature of reality, or the program written in the language of love. Now, the key question is, if our natural state is one of elevated emotions and unconditional love, what is keeping us from experiencing the state of elevated emotion and harmoniousness all the time? The answer is simple, and the answer is our imperfections. Our imperfections are manifested through thoughts, emotions, actions, and beliefs that are not aligned with the nature of reality. If reality was created by a loving programmer, written in the code of love, we can think of our imperfections as imperfect lines of code. In other words, we can think of our imperfections as bugs. Bugs express themselves as a lack of love in our thoughts, actions, emotions, and beliefs. In simple words, imperfection is a lack of love. It's a lack of unity with God. All our imperfections are stored in the subconscious mind, because the subconscious mind records everything we ever experienced, and sadly, we have a full memory bank of it. I couldn't go through the entire presentation and not reference The Matrix, The Lord of the Rings, or Star Wars, I guess. But there's a beautiful quote by Yoda in the movie. I think it's the Clone Wars, like the second one, Attack of the Clones. Here it goes. Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. I sense much fear in you. He was talking to Anakin Skywalker. And where do the imperfections come from? They come from the same place as our beliefs and the rest of the contents of our subconscious mind. We explored that in chapter 1. Also, our very own thoughts, feelings, and actions that resulted out of the programming we have with subsequent behaviors and beliefs. And I'm not going to go into all of this because we already discussed it in chapter 1, but here we will discuss a very important add-on where the imperfections come from. our attachments. Your level of attachment towards something it basically determines your level of aggression. If I took your phone away from you and you were really attached to your phone or the contents on the phone out of reasons only known to you, on a sufficient enough level of attachment, you would be willing or able to judge me, insult me, fight me, hurt me, and even kill me on the most extreme level of attachment. You probably wouldn't kill me because of a phone, but some things are more important to you than that. The funny thing is, as humans, we have the predisposition to attach to everything and anything. We get attached to our wealth, we get attached to our health, we get attached to people in our lives, we get attached to our jobs, careers, our security, we get attached to our perceived image. How many attacks, murders, and suicides happen because of losing or gaining wealth, losing or gaining status or recognition, and losing or gaining a partner? People get so attached to these things that they're willing to inflict harm and even take a life because of it. Even more interesting is that people get attached to ideas and concepts, even positive concepts and ideas like you should be truthful. What happens when someone lies to us? Then, if we are attached to the idea that you should be truthful, we are inclined to judge, mock, insult, abuse, and maybe even attack the sort of lies. In this case, another human being. We can apply this line of thinking to any idea. Being intelligent is important, being fit is important, being spiritual is important. If you're not familiar with this, there's even something that's referred to as spiritual ego. Basically, I think of myself as being very spiritual, and therefore I judge people that are showing like the opposite of it. And in the moment when someone displays characteristics that are not in line with what we believe is important, we're prone to judgment, mockery, and even abuse depending on our level of attachment. Now, to discuss one attachment in particular, which is also connected to everything else, the ego. The ego is a mental construct that relies on beliefs to define itself. The ego attaches itself to beliefs because they provide a sense of stability, safety, and identity. It develops as we grow and begin to differentiate ourselves from others, creating the sense of I that influences how we think, feel, and behave, our identity in relation to the external world. The ego works largely through identification, the process of attaching itself to labels, achievements, roles, desires, appearances, and experiences to define who we think we are. When you strongly believe in something, the ego will go to great lengths to protect that belief, even if it's limiting or false. And this is why challenging deeply held beliefs can feel threatening to the ego, as doing so may shake the very foundation of who we think we are. The ego itself is not inherently bad. It allows us to function in the world. Without the ego, we would struggle to maintain a coherent sense of self and interact meaningfully with others. A balanced ego allows us to confidently assert ourselves, set and achieve goals, make decisions that align with our values, and protect our well-being without feeling inferior or superior in relation to others. It also plays a crucial role in developing resilience, discipline, and a sense of responsibility. Now, the ego is useful when it's understood as a tool and not as an identity. And the problems start when we start seeing ego as who we truly are. We start defining ourselves based on external factors, based on our success, status, appearance, or validation from others, and we rely on those to feel worthy or secure. As a result, criticism, failure, rejection, or comparison can trigger defensive reactions like anger, fear, or shame to shield us from experiencing discomfort. We resist others' viewpoints and experiences that threaten our ego, which limits our ability to connect and empathize. The more attached we are to the ego, the more we defend it and resist anything that feels like it could threaten our identity in order to maintain a sense of control, certainty, and safety. Therefore, attachment to ego is fear-based. All of this creates a sense of instability, ironically, because the ego's sense of self-worth is dependent on external factors. When we identify ourselves with our role or status, we separate ourselves from others who may not share the same characteristics or experiences. We judge and categorize people, situations, and experiences in terms of us versus them, better versus worse, right versus wrong, and this leads to division and separation. At its core, the ego is built on the illusion of separateness. I am separate from you, I am different, or I am not connected to the greater whole. This perception of separation creates a disconnect from the deeper truth of reality and who we really are. It leads us to believe that we're separate from God, from others, and from the world around us. In reality, there is no separation and all is one. The only separator is the ego. The key takeaways to this section is attachment to ego is fear-based. Attachment to ego leads to a cycle of reactionary thoughts, emotions, and actions that don't serve us. In other words, it leads to imperfections, and they come from the ego feeling threatened and trying to protect itself. What results from this are lower frequency feelings, thoughts, and actions that are not aligned with love and not aligned with God. In Christianity, there is a word that describes higher levels of attachment to ego. The word is pride. And to clear up the confusion, pride and being proud are different in their essence. Being proud of someone in your life, for example, like when someone close to you experiences something great. Being proud is rooted in gratitude, delight, and acknowledgement, celebrating and being happy about an achievement without comparison or ego. Pride, on the other hand, stems from an inflated and distorted sense of self-importance, fostering separation or superiority. It's when you accomplish something and you go like, I did that, like without any help or anything. And this will make sense the further along we go into this course. Now, pride is considered the root of all sin because it is the illusion of separateness that forms the foundation for all other sins to arise. At its core, pride reflects the ego's belief in its independence and self-sufficiency, a denial of our inherent connection to God. If you got triggered because I used the word sin, let's dive a bit deeper and understand the word a bit better. The usual way that people understand sin is that it's a moral failing, a deliberate transgression against God's will, and a definitive act of disobedience and rebellion against God. As a consequence of our rebellion, we have the prospect of judgment, condemnation, and punishment in the form of spending an eternity in hell. This isn't anything that anybody actually wants, so this understanding is closely connected with emotions like fear, guilt, and shame, and to my modest opinion, it's a very rigid way of understanding sin. It is a way, but kind of rigid in the sense that it's limiting and can maybe produce results that are not aligned with what we're aiming for. And a guy at a conference, I was at a prayer meeting, asked me, "Are you living in sin?" And honestly, I was super confused by the question because my understanding of sin is somewhat different. Because there is a whole another way of looking at sin. The Greek word for sin, hamartia, literally means missing the mark or falling short of the target. As you know, the Bible was written in Greek and Hebrew, I think, as the two main languages. And through the translations, somewhat the nuances of the original words can be somewhat lost in translation. But if we go by the original Greek word, falling short of the target, the question is, what target are we falling short of? And the target is our ability to reflect God's qualities like unconditional love in our thoughts, emotions, and actions. When a person thinks, acts, and behaves in ways that deviate from this divine ideal, they miss the mark. So sin is not about committing intentional wrongs, but about failing to fulfill the potential that we all have, the potential to live in alignment and union with God and love. From the Bible, Romans 3, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. It's like an archer aiming at a bullseye but missing the center, not because they lack effort or intention, but because their aim is off. In this sense, sin is not a moral failure that should be judged and condemned. It is a failure to live in harmony with God's perfect design for our lives. We might say it's not because of the lack of effort or intention, but maybe because of a lack of proper understanding. Usually people think, oh, I'm not sinful, I haven't killed anyone, I don't steal, I don't lie. This is usually the reaction I get when I speak with people, and when I tell them that they're sinful. They can't really wrap their minds around it. But let's try it. How many times did you behave with less than perfect thoughts, emotions, and actions in your life? Yes, you probably didn't kill anyone. However, how many times did you hate someone? How many times did you cover up the truth? How many times did you reject the existence of God? How many times did you harbor aggression for yourself, for others, and for situations that you find yourself in? How many times did you lack the will to live or to get out of the bed in the morning because things are so messed up? How many times did you judge the people because they behave differently than what you believe is right? How many times did you see yourself as separate from the people and the world around you and acted according to that belief? Like, I'm not sure what your answers are gonna be, but I can tell you from my personal experience that I can answer all of these questions with yes many times. Therefore, the sinfulness is at a very high level, and therefore there are many instances of imperfections bubbling in the subconscious mind. This is a beautiful quote. I'm not sure where it's from. That's why there's no source. Maybe it's from A Course in Miracles, but I haven't gone through the course, so I can't say for sure. I found it somewhere on Reddit on one occasion, and I had to write it down. What is not love is always fear, and it goes back to the idea of there being two main emotions. One of them is love, and the polar opposite is fear, and everything else is basically a follow-up on the main emotions, like different forms of the main emotions of love and fear. And when we look at all of this, we can quickly come to the conclusion that we have all handled people and situations in our lives imperfectly. We haven't always reflected love in our behavior. As a result, we have imperfections brewing in our memory. With this interpretation, the words imperfection and sin have the exact same meaning. Thoughts, feelings, actions, and beliefs that are not aligned with love, not aligned with God, because God is love, So for future references, we will stick with the term imperfections, but if you hear like sinfulness at any point, you can be sure that I'm speaking about the same thing. So what are the consequences of imperfections that we have stored in our memory? Okay, let's take a step back and think about the building blocks of beliefs. You are familiar with this circle, and beliefs influencing emotions, thoughts, and actions, and they're intrinsically linked with beliefs. Now, imperfect thoughts, emotions, and actions result in the formation of imperfect beliefs. It works, the other way works as well, in terms of imperfect beliefs result in imperfect thoughts, emotions, and actions. Now, imperfect thoughts, emotions, actions, and beliefs lead to repeated actions, and repeated actions lead to habits, and this ultimately reflects in a deeper character development. All of this leads to an expression of a life that is not aligned with the nature of existence, with the programming code of love, and with God. And we can look at this from a different level. We can look at the unmanifested part of our trinity of existence, which is commonly referred to as spirit. And the spirit represents our electromagnetic field that we discovered in chapter 4, the heart's electromagnetic field. Here's an individual with the field, but it's believed that not only human beings, but plants, animals, and even inanimate objects possess spirit. And this is similar to a worldview held by earliest civilizations and even some cultures today, in which every object in nature was thought to possess a spirit. This is all something that we have seen in quantum physics, where every particle exists as wave and information simultaneously. In other words, spirit is a subtle electromagnetic field that corresponds with information. Subtle means that it's not usually perceived through our senses as physical reality. What you're seeing here is a leaf that got cut almost in half, and then got pictured with the photographic technique called Kirlian photography. And Kirlian photography captures electrical coronal discharges, or in other words, something very similar to the electromagnetic field. And you can see even when the flower is cut in half, with the picture it shows the outline of the entire flower, which would be like the electromagnetic representation of the entire flower. And we can also see an example of a hand photographed with Kirlian photography, and it just beautifully aligns with the idea of everything belonging to the spectrum of light, and even matter and our bodies being like the condensed form of light with a light field around us. Now, what if the electromagnetic field around us doesn't just carry the current intent, thoughts, and emotions like we learned in chapter 4? Rather, it contains the sum total of information about us at very subtle levels. Basically, everything that is in our subconsciousness is somehow represented in the field itself. In a way, our body is a manifestation of the subtle level. It is the way our existence collapses from wave into matter. And going back to the book of the Kybalion, we also have the principle of correspondence. As above, so below. As below, so above. That means that basically the different levels are reflections of each other. And there are people that study this field extensively and learn that the field contains very subtle levels of information. One example is the work done by Sergei Nikolaevich Lazarev, and he has studied human energy fields since the 1980s and gradually began to see, understand, and diagnose the human energy field. He came to the conclusion that it is in fact the higher, more subtle layers of the field that regulate the body instead of the other way around. Studying thousands of patients, S.N. Lazarev noticed that people often did not feel or comprehend their emotions, but he was able to see them clearly. Gradually, he came to the conclusion that feelings that a person does not perceive consciously appear in his subconscious mind. From the subconscious mind, the emotions have an impact on a person's health and character. The aspect of him being able to see the emotions in the field clearly goes back to Padre Pio being able to tell people when they left out something during confession. It's a field of information that some people get access to. So he was able to see all of that in the subtle fields of the patient. So that means that everything that our subconscious mind has stored exists as information in the subtle fields of our existence. Pretty much everything about us, the thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and past actions can be found in the field that surrounds us. And I also found, like, Lazarev is not the only one. I found other energy healers, and they all confirmed this hypothesis. So, what would it mean if we discover that each moment of our lives is a part of a conversation, an ongoing dialogue with God and the world around us? And what if the language of the communication is not necessarily with words, but with our thoughts, feelings, emotions, perceptions, and beliefs that we carry inside of us and radiate outwards through our electromagnetic field in each moment of every day? In all quantum experiments, the act of observing collapses the wave of possibilities into a concrete outcome. The observer seems to be the factor that brings probabilities and potential into form, which makes the observer an active participant in the creation of reality. And this makes our reality an interactive one. So, you're in a constant interaction with reality. Your thoughts, emotions, actions, and corresponding beliefs are your tools of participation in the reality, and they come together to form your internal state of being. So your internal state of being is the sum of your thoughts, emotions, actions, and beliefs. Now, through the electromagnetic field, you're in implicit and constant communication with the unified quantum field, or in other terms, with God. So the question is, based on everything that is contained in your field, what exactly are you telling God? Matthew 6, don't be like them, because your Father knows what you need before you ask Him. This might be how God knows everything, because essentially we're communicating and exchanging information with God all the time. And by definition, a dialogue is a two-way experience. So that means just as we're sending and radiating something, what we're communicating with God, God is also returning the energy and communicating back to us. It is responding to what we are, or in other words, to our internal state of being and everything that we are in that moment in time. So in simpler terms, God responds to your internal state. Now, is communication from God towards us only for the elected, the prophets, and the miracle workers? Or can we find responses from God in our lives right now? The question is, how is God communicating with us? Even though it happens on multiple levels, like some way beyond this presentation, but it also happens in the most obvious way possible, through the rules of time and space that we perceive as our physical reality or the events in our lives. The quantum field absorbs the energy, vibration, and information that we project, our internal state, and then reflects it back, the energy, vibration, and information, through the events, situations, and people in our lives, through our external reality. From the lens of quantum physics, your internal state collapses the potential of your life into concrete experiences. In other words, your external reality is a mirror of your internal reality. This makes you a co-creator of reality and not just a passive observer or a victim of circumstances. This means that your inner state impacts the quantum field and influences the physical world around you. If you hold empowering beliefs, you're sending out a different vibration than if you hold limiting beliefs. The mirror of the reality then reflects back that vibration in the form of experiences, people, and opportunities. In everything that we experience, our abundance or our lack, we are looking in a mirror of our subconscious beliefs and our internal state. Example: if you believe life is difficult and full of struggle, your beliefs act like an observer, collapsing the quantum field into experiences that reflect that difficulty. This is why people often say what you put out into the universe comes back to you, and this is also where the popular law of attraction comes into play. You attract what you are. And you can view the events of your life as a feedback mechanism, and this invites you to recognize the message that you're sending. Every event in your life, every relationship with the people around you, every disappointment and every success you've ever experienced, everything in your perception of life is served as a part of that feedback mechanism. It is a mirror of your internal reality. It is a feedback served in response to the signal and the information that you are sending out. If you don't like the frown in the reflection, don't get a new mirror. Try smiling instead. Whatever external change that we want to make, we need to change the internal. Everything is energy, and that's all there is to it. Match the frequency of the reality you want, and you cannot help but get that reality. It can be no other way. This is not philosophy, this is physics. Albert Einstein. It's through this mirror of reality that God is communicating with you. As God is the manifested reality, it means that the entirety of the manifested reality in our lives is an expression of God. Just as God experiences himself through all of us, we are experiencing God through our existence. Every person, every event, every random occurrence, everything that you experience plays a role in the orchestra of God. And this is a beautiful image that does a great job of illustrating this. Like a man on the ledge, like being pushed over by God in order to feel and get saved by God, standing on God, within God, on God. It's confusing as hell, but that's sometimes what reality is really like. And also me, also God. So if God is really communicating with us through the events and relationships in our lives, what is God saying to you? Do you see patterns that recur in your jobs, in your personal relationships, and in your family? Are you getting more sick than you should? Do your pets seem to be sick more than they should? Or does your car break down frequently? As insignificant and random as some of these sound, they may all be related. Maybe God is calling to you, signaling and patiently awaiting the day that you recognize the language of the messages that are being sent, so you can co-create a life where hate and suffering are a thing of the past. Our relationships to the people we love, our jobs, our finances, our health, and situations we find ourselves in can be a source of a lot of hurt, headache, and heartache. Now, if God is all-loving, oh so wonderful and perfect, then why is all of this happening? If everything is according to his will, how can there be so much suffering and anguish in the world? How can my life be lacking in so many aspects? Health, career, relationship with the people around me. Why are we finding ourselves in these imperfect situations? And personally, I often struggled with this. And many years ago, I met a monk with whom I talk to whenever I get stuck, even today. And in my first encounter with him, I asked him this question, and his response remained with me from that day on. He said, there is a difference between God's will and God's allowance. What this means is, God's will is in line with elevated emotions and resulting actions and behavior. For us to act in union with God and to reflect His qualities of unconditional love and compassion. But God loves us so much that He gave us free will. That means we get the freedom to choose what we believe in and how we act. As a result of our imperfect beliefs and actions, we are creating imperfect results, and God allows a lot of that to unfold. Here's the main takeaway, or the most important point. God loves you and supports you unconditionally. You are unconditionally supported in whatever you believe in. There is often the misconception of God as an old judgmental man sitting in the clouds and judging our every action. Essentially, we're projecting our own limitations on God. It's not that He wants us to lack anything. He doesn't judge our beliefs as right or wrong. It is our own imperfections that result in the consequences and imperfect results that we see in our lives. It is us who are punishing ourselves through our own imperfections. God simply holds the mirror for us. If we don't like what we see, God isn't to fault for that. Essentially, we are manifesting reality all the time. If I'm always manifesting, why do I have a lack of abundance then? You don't have a lack of abundance, you have an abundance of lack. There is a belief in you that is reflected abundantly that you lack. So the lack is a symptom of an imperfection. In our natural state of union with God, there can be no lack. As God is perfect, everything flows perfectly. Essentially, we need to get out of the way and return to our natural state and its ability to manifest perfect abundance in everything. Here's the fun part. Our electromagnetic field is full of information. Imagine that imperfections are registered as a disturbance or as a wound in your electromagnetic field. In other words, a fracture. Within the fracture, there is an emotional charge that is disturbing the field. The emotional charge consists of lower frequency emotions and information from the past. When emotions from the past, like grief, anger, guilt, or fear, are not fully processed or released, these emotions can become trapped in the field and the body, which can manifest as physical discomfort, mental blockages, or emotional triggers. This charge is acting like a magnet, and it's attracting similar experiences again. How does this manifest? Through challenges, issues, obstacles, difficulties, and inconveniences on the life path. How does this look like? We can have difficulties at work, we can have relationship issues, we can have financial struggles, we can have deteriorating health, even little stuff like car breaking down, pet getting sick. I mean, there's no limit to the difficulties on the life path that we can experience. Now, the difficulties are a manifestation of an imperfect internal reality, our imperfections. And it is the manifestation of it into an imperfect external reality. So every problem or difficulty that you experience is on some level connected to your imperfections. From the Gospel of Thomas, saying 6, public ritual, Jesus says, "Don't lie and don't do what you hate, because everything is revealed in the sight of heaven. For there's nothing hidden that won't be revealed, and nothing covered that will stay a secret." This is also mentioned in Luke 8 in the Bible. For there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be brought to light. He went on to say, pay attention to what you hear. With the measure you use, it will be measured to you, and even more will be added to you. For whoever has will be given more, but whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. One way of interpreting this, in the side of heaven, everything is revealed, meaning through our electromagnetic field, all information and all our imperfections are in plain sight. Nothing concealed that will not be brought to light. Our imperfections play a key role in the manifestation of our lives. So even if when we try to conceal our imperfections, they still show up as the results we get in our lives. With the measure you use, it will be measured to you. And for whoever has will be given more, but whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. This is the external reality mirroring our internal reality, and it's beautifully explained how our beliefs are connected with the results that we have. So if we have like an imperfect belief that results in lack, that's explained with whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. On the other hand, if your belief is an abundant one, then it's for whoever has will be given more. Why are we not getting the correlation between our imperfections and the difficulties in our lives? Usually there's a time discrepancy between the transgression against love and its manifested consequences in the form of physical reality. This is also dependent on the current state of the human condition. We're so filled with imperfections and imperfect results that we don't know where one begins and the other ends. People with a higher degree of purity can usually notice this causality much quicker. So let's take a closer look at disease as a consequence of our imperfections, because disease is essentially a form of a difficulty on the life path. At first, we have the fracture, which is created in the field through imperfect behavior, thoughts, feelings, and actions. If the fracture is significant through intensity or repetition, the disruption of the field becomes much more significant. At some point, the disturbance from the field manifests physically as disease in the body, and the physical body reflects the state of the field. This means that a disease is a manifestation of the fracture in the field. It doesn't originate in the body. In fact, the body and the physical reality is the last place where our imperfections show up. In other words, the imperfection rises up to the surface. It's also very interesting to think of disease as frequency. Imperfections correlate with lower frequency emotions and corresponding behavior. In the context of bioenergetics, quantum and vibrational medicine, every cell, organ, and system in the body has a natural vibrational frequency, and deviations from these frequencies can indicate disease or imbalance. Healthy human cells typically resonate within a specific frequency range, often cited as 62 to 70 MHz for optimal health. When the body is exposed to stressors like emotional distress, toxins, or pathogens, cellular frequency may drop, leading to disease. For instance, it has been suggested that cancerous cells resonate at lower frequencies, below 42 MHz. Now, we have basically the father of medicine, and this is his opinion on this idea. Illnesses do not come upon us out of the blue. They're developed from small daily sins against nature. When enough sins have accumulated, illnesses will suddenly appear. If someone wishes for good health, one must first ask oneself if he is ready to do away with the reasons for his illness. Only then is it possible to help him. Hippocrates. And the idea of connection between lower frequency emotions and their effects on physical health can be found in systems of natural healing of Ayurveda, which is more than 3,000 years old, and traditional Chinese medicine, which is more than 2,200 years old. According to Ayurveda, mental toxins and negative emotions lead to disease in very concrete ways. For example, unresolved anger can accumulate in the liver and impair its functioning. Unprocessed grief can disturb the lungs. Chronic anxiety can upset the health of the colon. Essentially, there are countless ways that imbalances in the mind and emotions can manifest as physical disease. In traditional Chinese medicine, the essence is the same. There's a strong connection between emotions and development of disease. And the traditional Chinese medicine views emotions as an integral part of the overall well-being of an individual. Another one from Hippocrates: foolish the doctor who despises the knowledge acquired by the ancients. Even looking back at earlier parts of this course, we saw the correlation between lower frequency emotions that induce stress and activate the sympathetic fight or flight system. Chronically elevated fight or flight response leads to incalculable number of diseases. It also has a profound effect on epigenetics, activation of genes for health and longevity or genes for disease. The expression of genes passes down to children and future generations. Whichever way you look at it, all of it leads back to the concept of imperfections and the effect they have on us on so many levels. I'll take it a step further and explain it this way. This is from the previous chapter. Elevated high-frequency emotions activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest response, and lower frequency emotions activate the sympathetic nervous system or the fight or flight response. Now, with one simple change, we can rephrase this and still say the same thing. God activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest response, and imperfections activate the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response. We said this, God is love, and therefore all emotions and byproducts of love activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest response, which is vital for the state of ease. And the imperfections, which are basically lower frequency thoughts, emotions, and actions, activate the sympathetic nervous system, which leads to disease. God is love. There is yet another way of looking at this. If this wasn't enough, let's bring our soul back into the discussion. Our soul is the part of us that's always connected with God. Its natural state is one of unity and unconditional love. The soul is connected with the spirit and the body, or the soul has the spirit and the body if we're primarily identifying with the soul. If the soul's natural state is one of love, how does the soul feel when we behave in ways that are not aligned with its nature? How does the soul respond to our thoughts, emotions, and actions that are often severely lacking in love? We don't have to be soul experts, but just logically thinking about it, it sounds like it's uncomfortable. The idea of the spark of God or the spark of unconditional love and getting dragged through the mud of our imperfections is a painful idea. It kind of hurts just thinking about it. Now, you can think of difficulties on the life path as well as specifically disease, like what we have in this example, as a way of the soul to clean itself of accumulated imperfections. What happens is the imperfections from the field collapse into physical reality as difficulties on the life path or as disease. For example, if you catch the flu and after it has run its course, the disease and the corresponding imperfection leaves the body. As it leaves the body, it is no longer a part of our existence, as physical reality is the last level where imperfections manifest themselves. Think of difficulties on the life path as paying a ticket for speeding on the highway of love. We are basically paying our dues for our imperfect behavior, and then it rises to the surface, and by us going through the disease and the difficulty in a constructive way, the imperfection is eliminated. Going through difficulties constructively is a very powerful purification on all levels. Difficulties on the life path and diseases are just a form of God's communication with us and should be seen as opportunities for growth rather than something negative. They're a sign that God really loves you. As weird as this sounds, like when you really think about it, there is no other conclusion. Through the fractures in our electromagnetic field, we're signaling that we're not whole. We're not as perfect as we can be. And again, to go back to Matthew 5, be perfect therefore as your heavenly Father is perfect. We can see that we're not. And essentially what God wants you to do is to heal and to become whole again. So what should we do when we get sick or encounter difficulties? In my modest opinion, we should celebrate. We should rejoice, because we should thank God for His love for you, as He is essentially making you whole again. So accept the purification with love and with gratitude. With this mindset, you're creating a high frequency environment for the body through elevated emotions. If you think of the idea that disease corresponds with lower frequencies, through your elevated state of gratitude and joy, you're creating an environment that isn't constructive or sustainable for the dwelling of lower frequency occurrences or diseases. We have also learned that through heart coherence and elevated emotion, our immunity kicks into overdrive. The immunity boost also helps you deal with the disease efficiently. Usually when people encounter a difficulty or when they get sick, they get angry about it. Why this? Why now? This is terrible. I hate this, and so on. It leads to lower frequency emotions that enable the occurrence and the disease to linger on. You're resonating with it. The emotional charge that is there, the lower frequency emotions and information are aligned with it. And difficulties on our life path are just a signal that we need to look within and work on eliminating the imperfections from our behavior and from our stored memories through the process of purification. To repair and heal the fractures in our energetic field, God lets us encounter similar situations like the situations in which the fractures first occurred. In these moments, we are called to respond differently, to think, feel, and act in ways that reflect God and His qualities more: unity, love, and compassion, rather than repeating the patterns that caused the original disruption. Every difficulty is an opportunity to act in a way that is aligned with love. By reacting differently and choosing a higher path, we release the emotional charge associated with the fracture and restore harmony to the electromagnetic field. Through everything that we experience, we have constant opportunities to heal fractures and imperfections that linger on in our subconsciousness. Once the emotional charge is released, the energy begins to flow freely again, as the disruption in the electromagnetic field is removed. This is also reflected in the physical body, as the body is a reflection of the field. Energy is released and the blockage on both levels removed. Once the fracture is completely healed, we no longer need to go through the same lesson or situation again. The experience has served its purpose in our spiritual evolution, and we have learned our lesson. Every difficulty is an act of God's mercy and love for us, because it serves as an opportunity to heal, become whole, reflect divine qualities, and to get one step closer to our intended unity with God. Now, what happens when we go through difficulties poorly? The consequences of our imperfect behavior get increasingly serious. Let's say you start exhibiting an imperfect behavior. At first, it might show up as a tiny difficulty at some point. Naturally, you don't get it. Later, it shows up as a greater difficulty. You don't get it. At some point, it shows up as a disease. You still don't get it. And then even more chronic or serious disease shows up. You still don't get it. And then great difficulties start popping up everywhere. And you're still not getting it. Because you're not getting it, your behavior continues and the imperfections and fractures in your field accumulate. Through repetition and the intensity of imperfections, the fractures get deeper and the disturbance in the field stronger. All of this is reflected in your failing health and the difficulties that you're encountering in every aspect of your life, your relationships, career, money, and so on. And because you're not getting it, God has to use increasingly stronger signals and methods to get your attention and for you to realize that something is off. Think of it this way. You get aggressive towards someone you love because of an attachment you have. If nothing changes, you keep repeating the same imperfect behavior over and over again. Through repetition and intensity, the aggression sinks to a deeper level, into the subconscious mind, and it starts running as a program. At some point, the subconscious aggression reaches a critical point, the point of self-destruction. At the point of self-destruction, our foundational programming is not aligned with the programming of the reality, is not aligned with the programming of the reality. It's not aligned with love. It's not aligned with God. In programming terms, your existence has become the bug in the system of love, in the system of God. And what happens to bugs? They get overwritten or deleted. At this point, we're looking at serious consequences like serious worsening of health, passing of imperfections to family members and future generations, and the final form of the release is, of course, death. So think about the cells in our body again. If one of them stops performing the role it's designed to perform and starts to mutate, it gets eliminated by the body. And just like a cell, if alive, which can be seen as a cell in the body of God, doesn't gravitate towards the greater purpose of love or towards God and to fulfill its purpose, it becomes corrupted. When it comes to death, the soul has reached a point where it has become detrimental to stay in the physical body. The weight of the imperfections can become unbearable, so death is the final release and liberation for the soul. And by the way, please take this with a grain of salt. I'm just talking about the big picture stuff on the macro level of humanity. But on the micro level of why individual deaths happen, this is something that only God knows, because God knows what is best for the soul at the time of death and why it had to happen. And there's so many possible reasons why death occurs, like from higher purpose stuff to protection of the soul from future dangers. There's incalculable variations, and it's all in the hands of God, and whatever happens is always the most beneficial outcome that could have happened based on everything. How do our imperfections impact future generations? This is something that happens automatically, and one way of explaining it is epigenetics, which we covered comprehensively, that the way that your genes are expressed is passed on via the double helix, just as the entire DNA code. And another way of looking at this is the way how beliefs are formed in general, which is something that we discussed in chapter 1. Like children are like sponges, they absorb the behavior and beliefs of parents and family members automatically. And therefore, the seed of imperfection is implanted. Another interesting way to look at this is through the lens of the electromagnetic field of the parent and the child and the overlap between them. And this is something that Lazarev has illustrated very nicely in the work that he does with his patients. And now we will take a look at a specific example. While studying ill children, Lazarev saw that the deformities in a child's energy field are a repetition of the deformities in the field of the child's mother. So he concluded that the innermost emotions can be inherited, that a mother's feelings influence the character and the destiny of the child. As an example, aggressive behavior felt by a mother even before conception or during pregnancy could lead to many childhood illnesses. And there are many similar examples of this occurrence and many different patients where Lazarev and also people similar to Lazarev were able to pinpoint. So this means that there is an overlap in the fields between family members and especially between parents and their children. Going back to quantum physics, this represents a form of entanglement, and we said that entanglement is a very interesting concept when applied to human terms and relationships, but I think we can safely assume that family members are automatically entangled with us. And this is the best part, coming from the work that Lazarev did with his patients. However, if a mother changed her attitude to past events, her energy field would change, which led to a transformation of her child's field and character as well. As a result, illnesses would disappear and the child's life path would change. This is incredibly interesting, and this is something that we will take a closer look at in the next chapter, the chapter of purification. If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. And I reflected for a long time on this saying. I mean, there's no wrong answers. This is just an interpretation. But after everything that we have discussed, I think that the answer is love. If you bring forth love that is within you, love will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, the lack of love will destroy you. And as we learned, God is love. So we can just as well substitute it with God. If you bring forth God that is within you, what you bring forth will save you. And if you do not bring forth what is within you, the lack of union with God will destroy you. And in the next chapter, we will take a closer look at all possible tools that we can use for the purification of our existence.